Yesterday we looked at odd 4-digit numbers, and odd 4-digit numbers weren't too difficult, especially if it didn't have to repeat. You just had to remember that you could bring the 0 back in the second space, right? That was the hardest part. Even 4 digits, when they can't repeat, it's a little bit harder because you have to remember that you have your back number could be a 0, right? Which means if your back number is a 0, your second space can't be a 0. Or if your back number isn't a 0, your second space can be a 0. So you actually have to use cases because you're going to use the word or, right? If it's 0 back here, then this can't be a 0. Or if this isn't a 0, then this can be. That caused you to have cases. So we're going to look at the first one. Eric has now been told how many even 4-digit numbers are there. It doesn't specify that they can't repeat, so we assume that they can. If it can repeat, this isn't a hard question. So if it's a 4-digit number, we know that we have 4 blanks. We know that the first digit can't be 0, because if it was, it would be a 3-digit number. And we know that the back number the very last digit has to be even, right? So 0, 2, 4, 6, 8. Now, if ever you're stuck on a rule and you're trying to memorize a rule, and you're like, is 0 even or odd? Think about it. Is the number ending in 0 even or odd? So would you say 30 is even or odd? You'd say it's even, right? You'd say 40 is even. You'd say 50 is even. You'd say 500 is even. So if that's the case, then 0 would make it even, right? So I was thinking cases, not in rules. Okay. So we have 5 options back here. We always do our restrictions first. We have the numbers 1 to 9 here. So we have 9 options. And then there's no restrictions on the middle. So it could be 0 to 9, 0 to 9. So 10 and 10. And you multiply them because you need them all. Now, if you remember yesterday, 4,500 was how many odd 4-digit numbers there was too, right? Which makes sense because there's the same amount of odd 4-digit as there's even. Now, this is where I lose a few people, when we can't repeat. So I'm going to give an explanation. If you have 4 blanks, okay? Don't write anything after this because I'm going to erase and fix it. So just stop for a second and pay really close attention. Now people will say, this one can't be a 0, which is true, right? Then they'll say this one can be 0, 2, 4, 6, 8. However, let's think about this. I said when it's not repeating, you circle one of them and you keep it there, correct? Because that's how we remember which ones we have left, let's say. So if I circle any of these, 2, 4, 6, or 8, correct? What number can I have here? 0. What happens, though, if I circle 0 here? I can't have 0. So how can I make this be one case? How can I make this be one case when if I pick these 4, this can't be 0, or if I pick this, it can be 0, and if I pick this 0, this can't be. I can't make that be one case, right? Because if you choose to keep 2 there, and you choose to keep 4 there, and you choose to keep 6 there, and you choose to keep 8 there, we're going to put a 0. But if Annie chooses to keep 0, then she can't. You can't do that, right? So these 4 numbers will result in this 0 being able to be here. This one will result in 0 can't. So we have to do 2 cases. One case where the back number is 2, 4, 6, 8, and another case where the back number can only be 0. Does that make sense? Because it results in a different amount of options in number 2. Okay? So go back to the 4 blanks. This one can't be 0. I'm going to treat this one as if it is 0. Or, which means I'm going to add them, right? Or means add. 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 2, 4, 6, 8. All right. Oh, and this can't be a 0. That didn't change. So we'll do the case where 0 is the back one. Okay? So my restriction is this has to be a 0. So I have one option. Remember, I list the number of options above. Okay? And now I'm going to circle the 0 because I'm going to pretend I'm keeping it there because when I can't repeat, I always circle one of them and know that now that one's stuck there. Okay? So I can't use it. So it doesn't really affect anything. I have the numbers 1 to 9 for this blank. So that's 9 options. But let's pretend I keep the 1 because I'm going to keep 1 or 9 because they're on 0. So then for this blank, what do I have to remember? Can the 0 come back? No, because I used the 0, right? So now I have 2 to 9. So I have 8. Say I keep the 9 here, and I would have 2 to 8. So I have 7. So it's 9 times 8 times 7 times 1, which is how much? 9 times 8 times 7. What'd you get? So we have 504 options where the back number is 0. And we add to it the case where the back number isn't 0. Okay? So I have 2, 4, 6, or 8. So I have 4 options at the back. I'm going to keep the 8 just because I felt like it. You could circle any of the other ones and be completely correct. So then in this blank, I have the numbers what left? 1, 2, 7, and 9. How many options is that? 8. Now I'm going to keep the 9 here. So this is the error that comes in. People will tell me, well, I only have 1 to 7 left here. What haven't I used? 0. So you have to remember to bring that 0 back. Okay? That is common error 101. That error happens more than it doesn't happen. So remember to bring that 0 back. So I actually have 8 options. So people will always tell me 8, 7, 6 at this point, which it's not, right? I bring that 0 back. And now say I keep the 0 here. Now I'd have 1 to 7. So I have 7 options. So what's 8 times 8 times 7 times 4? So I have 504 plus 1792. 2,296. See the difference is if it's even, and the only reason why this is an issue for even is because of that second blank getting a 0 back in it. Odd doesn't have that problem, right? The second blank will always have a 0 back in it when it's an odd number because you didn't use a 0 in the odd digit at the back. You didn't use a 0 in the first digit because you can't. So the second digit for odd always has to bring back the 0, right? But with even, you could use the 0 or not. That makes the difference. Example 10. Whenever we see a word, English, whatever it is, there's some rules with it. One, it's a permutation, always, because order matters when it's a permutation. So it's a permutation, order matters. Okay? Because the word pew and wep are different words. If you told me order didn't matter, if I said pew or wep, they would mean the same thing. Do they? No. So the other thing is, they don't have to make real English words. So you don't have to sit there and like go through a thesaurus and see if the word exists, or the dictionary and see if the word exists in the English vocabulary, okay? You'll have oop or like oppo, and I don't care if it makes a word. And it could be E, it could not even have a vowel, okay? And it will still be fine for math, all right? Those are your rules. The other rule is what you see is what you get. So when given a word, it is assumed you only have the letters contained in that word the amount of times it occurs. So I have one E, one N, one G, one L, one I, one S, one H. That is all I have to use. If I use up an E, it is used up. Okay? Whereas when we were doing the license plates ones or whatever, you would be able to have 2 letters at the back not repeating, let's say. So I'd have 26 and 25, right? Or I could repeat them and I'd have 26 and 26, correct? But right now, when they give you a word, you have that word and however many letters are in it and how many times they repeat. So I have one E, one N, one G, one L, one I, one S, one H. If you use up the E, you've used it up. Okay? There's no more left to take. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, oops, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 letters. Now, I always make sure there's no repetition, and for today you won't have repetition because we're not doing repeating objects yet. But E-N-G-L-I-S-H. I always rewrite it. So you're like, yeah, that's English. Why are you rewriting it? That's stupid. But if I gave you the word pool, let's say instead, which I'm not going to for this question, but say I give you the word pool, I would write that as P-O-O-L. And the reason why I do that is the moment I have repetitions, I have to remember to do something about it, which we haven't learned yet. Okay, so whenever I get a word, I rewrite it, and whenever there's doubling up of letters or tripling up of letters, I write them underneath so that it reminds me, why am I doing that? Oh, there's a step I have to do if I have that happen. Okay, so yes, English looks ridiculous because it doesn't have any double ups, but if you had pool, you would see the difference. Okay, all right. So determine the number of distinguishable, and we need to read every letter on our exams and on our diploma and every word, every single thing. Don't skip and be like, I know what to do here, because you might skip this. So if you skip this instructions, which people do, you're not going to read 4-letter arrangements. They're not arranging 7 letters, which English has 7 letters. They're only taking 4 of them at a time. So we have to read every question fully on any test, any quiz, anywhere, any homework. Okay? All right. Any letter can be in any position. So we have 4 blanks. 1, 2, 3, 4, because we're doing a 4-letter word, which means every blank can contain 1 letter. Is there any restrictions on this? No. So this blank here actually has the letters from E to H. Every letter. So you could spell them all out. E-N-G-L-I-S-H would be all the options below it, right? Which means I have 7. This is what people do. They go 7, 7, 7, 7. But what did I tell you? You can't use the letter more than it appears. So indirectly, it's telling you can't repeat. Unless, of course, you have the word pool and there's 2 O's. Then you can repeat it twice, right? So people will say, well, it didn't tell me I can't repeat. And you told me if it doesn't say I can't repeat, then I assume that I can repeat. Words are different. They give you the letters. So indirectly, they're telling you you can't repeat any of them because they didn't give you a letter that repeated, okay? So when I can't repeat, which is what I can't do when I have letters, when I have a word, I'm going to circle an E. Now I have N to H as my options. So I have 6. I'll pretend I keep the N here. Then I have G to H, which is 5. Say I have a G here. Then I'd have L to H still left, which means I have 4. So I go 7 times 6 times 5 times 4. So I can't go 7 factorial because 7 factorial represents 7 by increments going down by 1 all the way to 1, right? Which this doesn't get to 1. So I'd have to actually go 7 times 6 times 5 times 4. What do you get? 840. Now, we know it's a permutation because order matters. I told you that, correct? And we're going down by 1 each time. If you don't go down by 1 each time, say it went like 7 and then I had a restriction on here and I could only have 5 letters in the second blank and then I'd have like 3 and then like 1, and they don't go down by 1 each time, you can't do what I'm going to show you. But if we can go down by 1 each time, so 7, 6, 5, 4, you can actually use the little p, and the p means permutation. So what I'm going to do is this is also the same as I have 7 letters. I pick 4. Now the option is going to be to choose the P or the C. You use P if it's permutation, you use C if it's combination. So whenever it's a word, you're going to use P. However, if this said that this letter back here has to be H, I could no longer use 7P4. I could use 7P3 to represent these, and then I'd have to use like times 1 for that H. That makes sense? Now, where is that button in our calculator? Good question. So, how are we going to type this in? And we need to know like that, and we need to know how to type it in our calculator because they might give us, instead of 840 as the answer on the diploma, they might give you 7P what, and you'd have to tell them what that what is, right? Okay, so we're going to go 7, math again, back to that same spot we were yesterday. Math, left arrow, back to probability. And we're going to pick 2 because it's NPR. And then we pick 4. Now the catch is that the NPR, this N has to be bigger than the R because it's saying I have 7 and I'm picking 4. I can't say I have 4 and I'm picking 7. That doesn't make any sense, correct? If I have 4, I pick 7, they'd be like, you can't, you have 4. right? So this number here always has to be bigger or equal to this. So n has to always be greater than or equal to r. Okay? And then we just press enter. And we get 840, same answer. Okay? Now, I want you guys to try B and C. D we'll do together because it's a little tricky. Okay? You try B and C. All right. So the first letter must be E. So we still have 4 blanks because we read above that it's a 4-letter arrangement. The only restriction is the first letter has to be an E. Now, how many E's are there? 1. So I have 1 option. Now I keep the E there. So I have 1 letter out of my 7-letter word, right? So how many do I have left for here? 6, then, yeah. And that's 120. So we have 120 different ways that we can rearrange the word English starting with an E. Okay, 4-letter words. The first and last letters must be vowels. So we have E and we have I as our vowels, correct? Does it matter if we do the first or the last one first? No. They just need to both be vowels. Now, I like listening cases so I don't make oopsies. So I'm going to be a rebel, and I'm going to start with the last one. Most people start with the first, and if this was me doing a test, I would not rebel, and I would start with the first one. But I'm going to show you that doesn't matter. So, E, I. 2 options. We agree that we can't repeat, right? Unless we have letters that repeat, which we don't. So I'm going to pick to keep the I here. So what do I have for an option here? E. A lot of people at first, because you're just learning, put 2 and 2. But you don't have that option, right? You're leaving one of them there. So it's 2 and then 1. Now the question is, how many letters have we used up? 2. We used the I here, and the E here. So we used up 2. So how many letters do we have left for here? 5 and then 4. Can you list them below? Absolutely. And circle 1. Then you don't make oopsies. Okay? I just don't have a lot of room and it's just going to run here. So it's going to be 40. Now the word must contain a G. You're going to get cases. People don't spot it right away. And once I show it to you, you're like, oh, that's obvious. But at first you're like, I have no idea what to do. So the word must contain a G. So that means the first blank could be the G, or the second blank could be the G, or the third blank could be the G, or the fourth blank could be the G. That means I have cases, which means I have ors. And the moment I have ors, I have to add. So I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I have a case where this is G, or where this is G, or where this is G, or where this is G. Right? So for every single one of them, that blank is going to have a 1 in it, above it. And now I've used up 1 letter. So how many do I have left? 6, then 5, then 4. 6 letters, 5 letters, 4, 6, 5, 4, multiply, multiply, multiply. What's a quicker way I could do this than going 6 times 5 times 4 plus 6 times 5 times 4 plus 6 times 5 times 4? What could I do? You have 4 cases that are the exact same, technically, in numbers, right? Yeah. Times one of them by 4. So could you go 1 times 6 times 5 times 4 plus all of them together? Absolutely. But there's a quicker way to do this because there's 4 of them, and technically they're the exact same. This is 1, 6, 5, 4. This is 1 times 6 times 5 times 4. This is 1 times 6 times 5 times 4. This is 1 times 6 times 5 times 4. So you go 6 times 5 times 4 times 4. So it should be 480. All right? So you're going to work on these cases. Here's questions to try. And the questions to try here. Now, if you look, keep going. You keep going. you're actually going to see the answers before factorial notation. So you can check and see if you get it right. If you don't know what you're doing, you're going to ask questions about it. Okay? So you're going to work on that for now. And then I also have textbook questions. But I'll assign the textbook questions tomorrow. For today, because it's such a short period, I want you to get through these. Okay? Ask me questions when you're stuck. You'll get stuck on a few of them because there's little tricks. Okay? So try them out.